All right, so have you ever wondered, like, where all the fish we eat actually come from?
Yeah, it's not something you think about every day.
Right, like it just kind of appears on your plate sometimes, but
Like magic.
yeah, kind of. But today we're diving deep into the world of aquaculture and the people who raise all that seafood we enjoy. We're talking about Aquaculture Hatchery Technicians, and this RoleCatcher guide we've got is seriously impressive.
Yeah, it's amazing how much detail they packed in there.
It's way more high-tech than I ever imagined.
Right, like forget those old images of someone just tossing fish food into a pond. It's a lot more involved than that.
So no more like idyllic images of, I don't know, fish farms. What's the reality here?
Think more like managing entire hatchery production processes from start to finish.
Oh, wow, okay.
And that often begins with something called broodstock management.
Brood stock management. Okay, now you're just using big words to sound smart.
I am not, I promise. It's actually pretty cool when you break it down. Imagine being a matchmaker, but for fish.
Okay, I'm intrigued. A fish matchmaker.
Basically, aquaculture hatchery technicians, they get to choose which fish will breed to make sure they get the best offspring, fish with faster growth rates, better disease resistance.
That's like designer fish.
You could say that. They're like fish genetics gurus.
Wow, that is way more scientific than I ever pictured.
Yeah.
So where are these technicians working their magic? Are we talking about a high-tech lab here? Or, more of a, what's the word, au naturel pond setting?
Well, it can actually be both. Yeah, hatcheries can be indoors or outdoors, often near a water source like a river or the ocean. You might be working with some really sophisticated equipment inside, and then boom, you're right there by the open water.
Okay, so maybe not the best job for someone who prefers to stay dry indoors all day.
Probably not. But if you're someone who loves hands-on work and doesn't mind a little water or a lot of water, it sounds pretty amazing, right?
It does. And this guide also mentions that it's not just a job, it's like a real career path with room to grow, which is cool.
Oh, absolutely. You could start as a junior technician, kind of learning the ropes, mastering those hands-on skills like how to test water quality.
It's essential stuff.
Right. And then there are even more specialized tasks like fish spawning procedures. Can you imagine helping fish reproduce?
That's like a whole other level.
It's a unique skill set for sure. And then as you gain experience, you could move into a senior role with even more responsibilities.
So what does that look like? What kind of things would you be doing as a, say, senior aquaculture hatchery technician?
We're talking about designing entire breeding programs, maybe even collaborating on like cutting edge research projects.
Wow, so you could be at the forefront of like sustainable food solutions and stuff.
Exactly.
That's amazing. So from fish matchmaking to letting groundbreaking research, it sounds like this field really does have it all. And this RoleCatcher guide, it does a great job of breaking down those potential career stages, which is helpful.
Yeah, I was really impressed with the level of detail they provide. Like they actually give you example profiles for each stage so you can really picture yourself in that role.
Okay, so let's say you did land that entry-level technician position. What does a typical day look like?
Well, you'd be assisting with all the daily operations, feeding, monitoring the fish, cleaning the tanks. It's all about learning the ropes, getting comfortable with the hatchery environment.
Right, kind of like paying your dues.
Exactly. And then as you move up to a junior technician, you'd start taking on more responsibility, maybe focusing on those specialized tasks we talked about, like the broodstock management.
So you're really diving deeper into specific areas.
Right. You might be responsible for spawning and egg collection, which means you need a deep understanding of fish reproduction, nutrition, all that good stuff.
So it's like you're playing a vital role in the entire life cycle of these fish, which is pretty cool. And eventually you could become like the senior technician overseeing the whole operation, developing innovative breeding programs, the whole
It's a
shebang.
real career ladder. And they even mention some certifications that can help you climb that ladder faster. Things like an aquaculture technician certification or a hatchery technician certification.
So if you're serious about this field, those certifications could really give you a leg up.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about all the hands-on aspects of the job, but this guide also emphasizes that scientific knowledge is really crucial, right? It's not just about getting your hands dirty.
You got it. You need a good grasp of biology, obviously, to understand fish behavior and development.
Right, makes sense.
But chemistry is just as important, especially when it comes to managing water quality.
Yeah, because those fish depend on a healthy environment to thrive.
And that's where chemistry comes in.
Okay, so biology, chemistry, what about math? Does that factor into the equation at all?
Oh, absolutely. You'll be analyzing data, tracking fish growth, figuring out the best ways to optimize hatchery operations.
So it's like you're using math every day without even realizing it.
Pretty much.
So we're talking about a job where you could be like examining fish eggs under a microscope 1 minute and then bam, you're crunching numbers to figure out feeding schedules the next.
That's a great way to put it. It's this mix of like hands-on work and, real science that makes this job so unique.
And speaking of unique, the guide mentioned something I never would have guessed, geography. Apparently, where you are in the world plays a big role in all of this.
It makes sense when you think about it, right?
I guess so. Explain it to me.
Well, I mean, the perfect spot for a salmon hatchery in Alaska is going to be totally different from what, say, tilapia need in a tropical climate.
Oh, right. Different fish, different needs.
Exactly. Water temperature, salinity, even like whether there are natural food sources nearby, those can all make or break a hatchery.
So it's like every location has its own personality, its own set of challenges.
It's true. And speaking of challenges, remember those automated feeding systems we touched on earlier?
Yeah, those sounded pretty high tech.
Well, that's just one example of how technology is totally changing the aquaculture game.
So it's not just about scooping fish food anymore.
Not at all. There are water quality monitoring systems that make sure the fish have the perfect environment. And get this, there are even genetic technologies being used to choose the best traits for future fish population.
A lot. We're talking about designer fish 2.0 now?
Haha, kind of. It's all about making things more efficient, getting better quality fish, producing more food with less impact.
That's incredible. So aquaculture hatchery technicians, they're not just fish farmers, they're innovators, shaping the future of food.
I like how you think. This guide really highlights that. It's a career at the forefront of sustainable food solutions, which is pretty cool.
It's definitely not what I pictured when we started this deep dive.
Yeah.
So we've got the technology angle, but the guide also talks about critical thinking, problem solving, all that good stuff.
Oh yeah, those are essential skills in this field. They're not just following a recipe. They
No.
need to be able to analyze data, spot trends, make judgment calls that could affect the entire hatchery.
So you got to be on your toes, ready for anything.
For sure. And it's not just about the numbers either. You need to be able to read and actually understand scientific papers to stay up to date. And you have to be able to communicate your findings to other people, maybe even the public.
So you need to be a scientist, a technician, a communicator. This is aquaculture hatchery technician superhero. But the guide does a really good job of connecting all of this back to career development, which I appreciate.
Yeah, it's all laid out really clearly. You start with a good foundation and then you can keep learning and growing throughout your career.
Which makes sense because aquaculture is always changing, right? New
Yeah.
tech, new research, you got to keep up.
Exactly. They even give you specific things you can do to stay ahead of the curve, like subscribing to industry magazines, going to conferences, that sort of thing.
Networking. Can't forget about networking.
Absolutely. Imagine being able to chat with the top aquaculture researchers or hatchery managers. You could learn so much.
It's like building your own little school of fish,
Yeah.
all working together towards, making the world a tastier place.
I like that. And the guide even mentions online communities, which is super important these days.
Oh yeah, those online groups can be lifesavers when you're trying to figure something out.
For real. So if you're someone who likes connecting with other people online, that's a built-in perk of the job.
Totally. Okay, so we've talked about a lot of cool things, but this guide also hints at something bigger, don't you think? Aquaculture isn't just about raising fish, it's about something more.
You're right. It's about the future of food. As our planet gets more crowded and climate change makes things less predictable, we need to find new ways to feed everyone.
And aquaculture is a key piece of the puzzle, right?
Totally. It's a really efficient way to produce protein, and it can be way better for the environment than traditional farming.
So it's good for people, good for the planet. That's a win-win in my book. This has been really eye-opening. It's not just a job. It's a chance to be a part of something bigger, to really make a difference.
You said it. And actually, as great as this guide is, it kind of made me think about something that a lot of career resources don't really address.
I'm listening. What is it?
Well, we talk about all the skills, the technology, but what about the emotional side of things? I mean, you're working with living creatures every day. That's got to come with its own set of challenges and rewards.
That is such a good point.
Yeah.
It's we focus so much on the practical stuff that we forget about the human element, the emotional connection. So what are you thinking?
Well, I mean, you have to imagine it's pretty rewarding to, nurture these fish, watch them grow from eggs into, well, whatever comes next.
Right, like you're playing a part in that whole cycle of life.
Exactly. But then there's also the flip side. What happens when things go wrong? Like, what if there's a disease outbreak and you lose a whole batch of fish?
Oh, that would be tough.
Right. It's got to be heartbreaking after you've put so much time and care into it.
It would be like losing a whole garden to a frost or something.
That's a good comparison. So yeah, it takes a special kind of person to handle that emotional roller coaster, the highs and lows of working with living creatures.
Definitely. You'd need a lot of resilience.
For sure, resilience is key.
This whole deep dive has been amazing. This RoleCatcher guide has given us a whole new appreciation for aquaculture and, the people who do this work.
Right, like it's a field you don't always hear about, but it's so important. They're on the front lines of our food system, really.
It's like a hidden world. And they're the unsung heroes feeding us all.
And helping to protect our planet, too, which is huge.
Absolutely. So for anyone listening who's, I don't know, maybe feeling a little inspired right now, thinking about a career change.
The career change.
Yeah, like maybe aquaculture is their calling. This RoleCatcher guide is a great place to start.
Oh, for sure. It's full of useful info, and it even has this glossary of alternative job titles, which can be super helpful when you're, like, searching online.
Oh, that's smart. Because sometimes you get stuck using the same search terms over and over.
Exactly. So instead of just looking for, I don't know, like aquaculture hatchery technician, you could try something like aquaculture rearing technician or aquaculture mooring manager. It's all about expanding your search.
So many options. I also really liked how they talked about transferable skills.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Even if someone tries aquaculture and decides it's not for them, the stuff they learn, the problem-solving, data analysis, that's valuable anywhere.
100%.
Well, this has been a deep dive indeed. We've learned so much about a field we knew surprisingly little about, and it's been great to have you here to break it all down.
I've had a blast. It's always fun to geek out about aquaculture, especially when you have such a captive audience.
And on that note, we'll wrap things up. Thanks for joining us as we explored the fascinating world of aquaculture and, of course, the incredible work of aquaculture hatchery technicians.
Cheers to that.
Until next time.